After they all left, I stayed alone in the small building. The college entrance examination results came out, and as one of the top 100 in the province, the school gave me a 100,000 yuan scholarship. I applied for forensic medicine at University of Central Florida, and the teachers and students I met were all very good. But I seemed to have lost my desire for entertainment, spending my days in the library or the lab, with studying becoming my only way to pass the time. Every year I would return to the alley to see if he had come back and to thoroughly clean the small building from inside out. In my second year, I heard my dad had been released from prison and went with a casino boss named Ju to make money in the South. Days slipped by like prayer beads, one after another, forming weeks, months, years. In my fifth year, I went to West US for an internship and met a very kind senior who took care of me. Coincidentally, he was my high school classmate's brother, Mason Brown. I didn't recognize him at first. After graduation, I followed him to take the public security exam back home and worked in the Criminal Investigation Brigade. I hoped to work with Ethan in the future. I wasn't afraid of hardship or fatigue, and sometimes they would praise me for being better than men, saying I brought honor to female forensic scientists. In these 6 years, whenever I tired of everything, I would think of him. Just the thought that he was living somewhere in the world was very important to me. As long as I thought of him, time seemed fragile. I couldn't figure out why the days with them were both long and short, so I kept replaying the memories. Just being alive on those memories was enough happiness. To delete any moment they appeared in my life, I couldn't be who I am today. Today I was writing a report. Suddenly my heart seized. The pen dropped from my hand and rolled to my feet. My heart felt like it was breaking, the pain making it hard to breathe, my body starting to go numb, tears streaming down unconsciously, so upset I felt nauseous. It was as if a tree, spiritually connected and vital to me, was being cut down in a distant place. Emily, what's wrong? My colleague Mason Brown saw my state and hurriedly came over. I grabbed his sleeve. Senior, I need to take leave. Right now, to Puji Temple. Occasionally over the years I would have these panic attacks, but never as strong as today. Falling in love with someone is like serving a god that could fall at any moment. Their every breath is related to him. I was too afraid and needed to draw some sense of security. They say that the wishes made at Puji Temple are the most efficacious. When people are helpless to the point of despair, they turn to faith. Standing in front of the temple, my heart was still panicked. The rain was pouring heavily. My senior didn't feel at ease letting me come alone, so he silently held an umbrella for me. I refused to use an umbrella, afraid my insincerity would prevent the Buddha from hearing me. Seeing that he couldn't persuade me, he too stopped using his. The sky was dark. The horizon seemed to have cracked open numerous slots. The sound of rain merged into a roar. Trees on both sides of the stone path shook wildly, huge raindrops beating down. Passers-by were all sheltering from the rain, but we stood out there, odd and unexpected. The temple was built on the mountain, 108 steps from the base to the top. I disregarded the stairs and knelt every 3 steps. My forehead touched the ground, knees on the stone, the muffled sound of impact scattered by the rain, each calling his name. Blood from my forehead, bruises on my knees. I prayed for the Buddha to see my sincerity. Climbing painfully to the last step, the temple doors were closing before me. Through the cracks, an old monk in dark robes holding prayer beads looked solemn and dignified. If there is no destined cause, how can there be a meeting? If there is no debt owed, how can there be a debt incurred? From the beginning, the connection was shallow. The predestined cause is over. The predestined cause is over, and there is no debt owed. Benefactor, please return. As the temple doors closed completely, the chant suddenly echoed through the mountains. I heard someone calling my name in a daze, but when I turned back, only the howling wind was at my heels. A sense of overwhelming confusion and despair swept over me, leaving me clueless about where to go next. That day, I bid farewell to his departing figure, thinking it would be years before we met again. Little did I know, our next reunion would wait for another lifetime. It was just an ordinary morning when I walked into the dissection room as usual, only to find the person I longed to see lying on the dissection table. The deceased, Ethan Clark, 31 years old, male, approximately 186 centimeters in height, weighing 75 kilograms, time of death 48 hours. I couldn't hear anything more, as a buzzing noise filled my ears. Emily, do you know the deceased? No. Then you'll perform the dissection. Okay. I feigned composure, catching David's concerned gaze, but he said nothing. Prying open the stiff right fist, I found a crumpled $10 bill folded into a small triangle. I thought I'd break down crying, screaming, wailing. But I felt nothing. My emotions were drained, my heart as still as an unwavering lake. It turns out that when you're heartbroken to the extreme, you suddenly find calm. A calm so deep that I went through the procedures without any change in expression. Along with Ethan's body, a video came back, documenting the inhumane torture he suffered over 30 hours. Drug traffickers burned his body with fire, shattered his bones with hammers, and whipped him until wounds laced his skin. As he neared unconsciousness, they poured salt into his wounds and repeatedly struck his face and head until he was tortured to death. It was the last desperate struggle of the largest drug trafficking group at the border, brought down by the forces. Ethan Clark had been undercover for 6 years, working with the police to completely eradicate the long-standing border drug trafficking syndicate. But just as he was about to walk away fully, his identity was exposed, and he faced brutal retaliation from the traffickers. In the hospital, David, whom I hadn't seen for 6 years, lay bandaged in a hospital bed, his right arm and left leg gone. He said, "It's been Emily, it's been a long time." I answered, "A long time." We looked at each other silently for a long time. Tears came uncontrollably. "David, why can't Ethan come back all of a sudden?" He paused, a pained expression on his face making it difficult to speak. "It's your father. He was lured to human trafficking at the border. Because he always carried less, his success rate was low, which angered those people. To save his own life, he unbelievably pushed you out, saying he had a daughter he could deceive to come help them. Ethan intercepted your information secretly, so at the end of the mission, when your father saw Ethan, he insisted he was the police. He just wanted revenge, but accidentally hit the mark. After his identity was exposed, he protected us to leave first, but he never made it out himself." I pressed myself against the wall, my mind blank. I never imagined reality could be so absurdly cruel. Where is my father now? Dead, from an overdose. I didn't know whether to laugh at his death or to mourn the injustice that Ethan faced, or maybe hate myself for having dragged him down. After a long pause, David asked cautiously, "How has she been these past years?" Then, self-mockingly, "Lucky I didn't hold her back. I'll be just a cripple in the future." 2 years ago, she became a vegetative patient in an accident. Forced into marriage by her family, she drunkenly sped up the mountain and crashed. She was always waiting for you. In the empty hospital room, 2 souls abandoned by the world exchanged the information they most wanted to know, impaling each other's hearts deeply with the sharpest arrows. I went home and slept for 2 days, foolishly hoping it was all a dream and that it would all be okay when I woke up. But reality was still there upon waking. These are the ashes and personal effects of the martyr Ethan Clark. According to his will, these are to be given to his fiancée, Ms. Emily Wilson. I stood rooted to the spot. Among the possessions were hundreds of my sketches and a diamond ring. While I thought I couldn't keep pace with him, it turned out he had been watching over me for many long years. I trembled, mustering a bleak smile. The ring fit perfectly. Holding the wooden box, I whispered, "Ethan Clark, I'm here to take you home." Outside, the wind was strong, the autumn air thick, and the ground covered with withered yellow leaves fluttering and falling. I walked on with immeasurable sadness and desolation, as if carrying the weight of the world. Suddenly, I was bumped into by a 3-year-old chasing leaves, guarded by his mother behind him. The little boy instinctively apologized. "Sorry, Grandma, I didn't mean to bump into you." I turned to him and said, "It's okay." But he stared at me, perplexed. As I moved forward, I heard his innocent voice, filled with confusion. "Mommy, didn't you say everyone with white hair is a grandma? But she looked like a sister. That's so weird." "Shh, baby. If you see someone odd, it's because they're experiencing a pain you can't understand," his mother explained. The little boy watched the distant figure with naivety as darkness fell. the sunset casting an eerie light on my graying hair blending with the desolate autumn scene. Passing a flower shop, I stood at the doorway. "Excuse me, I'd like a bouquet of sunflowers. My husband doesn't like chrysanthemums." I returned to the alleyway with them in my arms. The osmanthus in the courtyard bloomed, scattered by the wind. I sat on Ethan's usual couch, gently touching the wooden box, as if he were still alive. "Ethan Clark, did it hurt at that time?" They say in the video, he made no sound, not a single tear shed. "Look, I got you your favorite sunflowers. This year I won't celebrate your birthday anymore. The time has passed and wishes don't work. After a pause, I won't celebrate your birthdays in the future either. I'm sorry for dragging you down. I would have rather been an orphan than have a father like mine. You're so foolish, taking just $10 to protect me, but indeed you protected me for a decade." I rambled on with many words, wondering if he was tired of hearing them, which might be why our door was knocked. Opening the door, there stood a tall and lean man in a trench coat, his eyes filled with unease. He looked at me for a long time, his gaze lingering on my hair, gradually misting with tears. I opened my mouth. "Elizabeth, what brings you here?" Seeing he wasn't about to leave, I let him in. He sat on the opposite couch. "I saw you weren't well, wanted to check on you. Do you know each other?" I showed him the ring on my finger. "He's my husband." He paused, his voice soft and soothing. "I'm sorry for your loss." I forced a faint smile, though my heart was bleeding. The silence stretched. Suddenly he said, "In October, the poplar leaves in Canas are the brightest, the snow in Shangri-La in November is pure white, and in December, the cherry blossoms in Tengchong cover the hills. What I mean is, you need to look forward. There are plenty more beautiful sceneries ahead. When I was 12, my dad passed away, my mom got cancer, and my brother was only 7. I felt just like you. But I gritted my teeth and persevered. My mom miraculously recovered, my brother grew up day by day, and once we got over that hurdle, things started to look up. I began to appreciate the mountains, the waters, and the world, the joy even a wildflower could bring me." I calmly stated the fact. "But you still had your mom and brother. I have nothing left." He looked earnest. "If you need, I'd be glad to stay by your side." The unspoken intent of an adult is clear without words. Although I didn't know when he started to see me as more than a sister, he had helped me a lot over the years and taught me many things. But a person has only one heart to give, and mine beats solely for one. I have him, and that's enough. He looked a little disheartened. "Elizabeth, it's getting late. Thank you for coming today. I want to sleep. Then rest well." At the door he hesitated and turned back. "Then let me make a reservation for the next life. I'll queue up behind him." He left without waiting for a response. But I won't have a next life. Life is too bitter, with nothing to hold on to. In the next life, I won't come back, lest I burden him again. I took the urn to Ethan's room and laid on his bed. It had been too long, his presence no longer lingered in the room. Maybe I'm a bad person. That's why heaven took back everything I had, punishing me by turning everything I grasped into ash slipping through my fingers. The road to true love is never smooth. It faces countless difficulties and is filled with them as well. The old sayings are lies. They say that two people whose names can be linked are fated, but there's no fate at all. Peace Alley has never been peaceful. Memories of the past rewind before my eyes, like playback in a movie, and I watch my own life as a bystander. The start of the story doesn't match the hardships endured along the way. The lament of my 14-year-old self after many years struck my heart. It turns out my life was always destined to be a muddy path difficult to traverse. In a daze, I returned to that day. The difference was, this time I didn't walk down the alley or push open that door. Instead, I turned and let the darkness torment me until it consumed me. Perhaps this is the best ending. I'd trade my chance at rebirth for 2 things with heaven. 1, for a world free from drugs, and 2, for an Ethan Clark I'd never see again. My body grew cold, breathing labored and weak, the thick taste of blood rolling in my mouth, trickling down my chin, ear, and finally staining the white sheets with a vivid bloom. Standing at life's end, I looked back to see the figures of the deceased crowding the platform to the netherworld, there to welcome me. After Ethan's death, he was posthumously awarded the first-class merit. As one of the most dangerous police forces recognized in peacetime, The average age of drug enforcement officers in our country stops at 41. Ethan died at 31. The drug enforcement fight is never without its battles, just that some people use their own lives as blades, their flesh and blood to forge a wall of peace. In 1992, badge number 013626 was activated. In 2012, badge number 013626 was retired. In 2017, badge number 013626 was reinstated. In 2023, badge number 013626 was permanently retired. Retirement is remembrance, activation is legacy, the badge is reactivated, and I become you. Years later, the deeds of the Clark family began to spread far and wide. The people of Peace Alley then realized that the youngster they once feared and despised was actually a drug enforcement officer. Some came to pay homage to where the hero once lived, only to find it desolate and changed. Others spontaneously went to the cemetery to pay their respects. As long as there are those who remember their sacrifice, the sin of drug trafficking will not be forgotten, and our country's drug prevention efforts will have hope. In the silent gray dawn, the cemetery is enveloped in mists of varying density, like a veil had been draped over it. 2 gravestones are covered with bouquets from those who came to pay tribute. Red ribbons tied around the stones wish them never to part in the next life. One marks the grave of the martyr George Clark and his wife, Amanda Clark. Near another monument rests the graves of Ethan Clark, a fallen hero, and his wife, Emily Wilson. A silent crowd gathers, with children as young as 3 and youths of 10, to men and women of middle age and the elderly, all sharing a somber expression. As dawn breaks, the first rays of the sun cut through the thick morning fog, illuminating the entire sky. Tears instantly fill the eyes of those present, as the long fight against drugs continues unnoticed, passing the baton one generation to the next, each vowing to protect this land in their own way. Our nation's crusade against narcotics, a universal endeavor of all mankind, is destined to triumph ultimately. The end.